street. So I won't sit up here and yammer on. But Congressman Rob Wittman from the 1st District here in the area. It stretches from Peninsula all the way up to Fredericksburg. Yes. We really appreciate you being here to talk to us today.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate it. Thank you all so much. I'll tell you what, instead of getting behind the podium here, I think I'll just stand out here by the table if that's okay with folks, and I'll have my little guide here to keep me going. Listen, folks, it's great to be with you. I want to let you know how much I appreciate you inviting me, you taking the time out of your day to be part of a discussion about how blogging plays a role in communications, especially on the political front. You know, these days I think all of us are running to catch up with how communications are evolving. And we all look each and every day, and you read or you hear of something new each and every day, and we're trying to figure out where we're going and how we're getting there. But obviously you folks play a tremendous role in getting information out and finding different avenues and different venues to communicate with legislators, to communicate with candidates, to try to get all of that information to folks, and in different ways. You know, I think folks in the media these days, as all of us are, struggle with figuring out how do we best communicate with folks, and what are people using to get their information. And I think the blogosphere plays more and more of a role in that as time goes on. So we really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. What I want to do is to talk about a couple of subjects. I know everybody is concerned about, if we're going to use the internet to get information out, we better make sure that the internet is an open and free place to provide information, that there aren't all of a sudden restrictions put on that. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the efforts on net neutrality. And a major focus of the debate coming up on telecommunications is what sort of impact should government have on the internet. And you know, we all know that the internet is the frontier in communications. You know, there's lots of innovation and neat things going on out there. The question is you know, what's the role for government? And should there be any regulation on the internet? And I know in H.R. 3924, there were several aspects of that bill that addressed that tried to define exactly what's going on with the internet. And essentially what that bill said was that the internet and all IP-enabled services are affecting interstate commerce. So we wanted to make sure that we kept that under the Interstate Commerce Clause so that there would be free and open exchange of information across state lines, and that such services would not be subject to jurisdiction of any state or municipal locality. So pretty much say, hey, listen, it's an open marketplace. We're not allowing localities or other entities to become involved in creating a patchwork system of regulating the internet, and also directing that the Federal Communications Commission shall not propose, promulgate, or issue any regulations regarding the internet or IP-enabled services. So pretty much keeping it within that open marketplace, that open and free flow of information, without regulation from the FCC, without regulation from state or local governments, and making sure that it is classified as interstate commerce so that there can be a free and open movement of information across state lines. So we felt pretty strongly about that, and I think that's going to be a continuing debate about what happens. Is the net going to stay neutral as far as government involvement? So we need to make sure that that discussion continues and that we keep the internet an open and free marketplace in the exchange of information. We look at information as a commodity, I think, like anything else, so we ought to be keeping the internet open. You know, another big issue coming up is broadband. If we're going to use the internet as the conduit to provide information, how do we make sure that we have access? And the access issue really is becoming more and more critical. If you look at the United States and how we rank worldwide, we are 18th in the world as far as internet and broadband access. And it's now, these days, not just internet access, but it's high-speed internet access. And especially in our rural areas, and we've been especially affected in the 1st District with that because the middle portion of our district is still very rural. And we want to make sure that we are doing all we can to provide that access. And there are some areas there where we have pretty decent access, but there are other areas where we literally have none. And the American Recovery Act, the stimulus bill as it's known, does have some money in there to provide some help to localities to provide fill-in for their broadband services. And I emphasize fill-in because when I was in the General Assembly, we talked very much about what do we do to encourage the expansion of the internet, especially in rural areas. And we wanted to make sure that we weren't going to get in and compete, that we weren't putting in duplicative services, that we were trying to just fill in those areas that did not have service. So this effort, I think, needs to be focused on making sure those areas without service are the ones we focus on, not building duplicative systems and essentially competing against people that already have fiber optic in the ground or already have head-in facilities or already have infrastructure out there to provide internet services. So under the Recovery Act, there is essentially $7.2 billion that will be available to localities, and a number of localities in the district have already made applications to fill in their systems, and most of that's going to be using fiber optic and a microwave transmission system to fill in those areas. Obviously, in low population centers, you're not going to bring fiber to everybody's door. There's no way in the world that you can afford that. And the bill consists of about $4.7 billion that'll go to the Department of Commerce for newly established broadband technology, and the remaining $2.5 billion goes to a Rural Utility Service, or USDA, to provide rural broadband. So there's going to be a mixture there about developing new technology, more efficient, wider spectrum, wider bandwidth, to make sure we can get more information through the pipe, create the bigger pipes, and then also make sure we have access in rural areas. So there's also a requirement that we come up with a plan, a national broadband plan, as you can see, by February 17th of 2010, to make sure that there's some coordination with the things that are going on and the dollars that are being spent to put this system together. So we are looking forward to seeing what that plan is going to be. When I was in the General Assembly, I served on the Governor's Broadband Advisory Council, and we talked about, again, not duplicating services, making sure we were just doing the fill-in. I served on that board with Michael Powell, who's a former FCC chairman. He had some great ideas about things we could do to increase access in our rural areas of the state. So that's what's going on with broadband. In the past couple of budget periods, we put together some budgeting requests to make sure that we had the resources available for broadband access, specifically in the Northern Neck, the Middle Peninsula, and the Eastern Shore. We saw those as the three rural areas in Eastern Virginia that really needed those efforts. The Eastern Shore is a little bit ahead of where the Northern Neck and Middle Peninsula are at this point, but we do have a map now that's been created as part of this effort that shows where the areas are that don't have service, and that's where we ought to be focused. So we are looking forward to getting that done and working with the Commonwealth and also the localities. And there have been some very active regional groups in this effort. In the Northern Neck, there's a group called Neck Tech that looks very specifically at trying to enhance access, working with the local internet service providers. There's one county there that's formed a public-private partnership to bring in an internet service provider. So people are using different ways to make sure that they have full coverage in these rural counties where the density is not such that it necessarily attracts lots of providers. So, let me talk a little bit too about some of the other bills out there. Congressman Rick Voucher from the southwest part of the state has a bill in. Rick is on the Energy and Commerce Committee, and as you know, there's a Uniform Service Fund. Everybody that pays a phone bill pays an additional fee that goes into a fund that essentially provides dollars to theoretically help provide more communications access in areas that may not have it. And it's normally been to help cell phone providers. And anybody that comes into an area that wants to provide cell phone service is eligible for these funds. What's happened, as you can imagine, is more and more competitors come in, there's more and more demand for the fund. So now the demand is outstripping the number of dollars going in the fund. And actually, it was a pretty robust fund. There were a lot of dollars there, but people have caught on to it now. So now the demand is exceeding the supply of dollars. So this bill is looking at paring some of that down, but it also now provides a fee on voice over internet protocol in addition to broadband.